to record on?
There we go.
Great.
I've learned something. Excellent. Thank you.
Sounds like we're off.
My day is done.
Okay, thank you, Pete. And hi, everyone. I'm Sian. So I'm, as Pete said, Head of Training and Delivery for Platform Wellbeing. And I just wanted to run through a quick session on reflective practice. I don't know how familiar everyone is with reflective practice. So if at any point I'm teaching you to suck eggs, please tell me and I'll stop and we can move on. But I just wanted to start by asking, like, what does reflective practice mean to people? What's the current understanding? What are we thinking when we hear those words? I'm going to open the chat so I can see everyone typing. Any thoughts on what reflective practice means? I don't believe that no one has any ideas.
There is, yeah, there's...
Is there a delay? Here we go. It's coming through on the chat.
Thanks.
Thanks, team. Okay, so we've got learning from experience. Yeah, absolutely. Reflecting on practice to get better at it. Yeah, it's an opportunity for growth. A space to share what's going well, what we could do better, and bringing in diversity of ideas from whole groups about what could be improved. Absolutely. Considering why we intervene and how effective that had been. Yeah, absolutely. So it's reflecting on what we've done, how effective that was, what was the outcome, what was the action. Absolutely. An opportunity to process. Yeah, absolutely. And learning. Okay, cool. That's a really good start. So we're all familiar with what reflective practice means. It's the opportunity to look back on our experiences, consider what's happened, what went well, what didn't go so well, how can we grow, what are the different perspectives on what happened and what might be useful moving forwards. So yeah, like Kenneth has just said here, a means of looking at an event or experience and extracting learning from it, both positive and negative, and processing the event or experience. That's a great definition, thank you. I might just incorporate that into my next training. Okay, cool. So why is it important then? Why do we need reflective practice? Any thoughts before I just start chatting? I think particularly now about working in kind of public and otherwise we'd go mad. Yeah, thanks all. So we work in challenging environments, right? When we're working with involuntary sectors, we're supporting people who've maybe experienced quite a lot of distress, and that can be really, really hard, particularly like Ol alluded to earlier with the New Systems Alliance stuff, when the systems that we're part of can in themselves be traumatizing. They can be frustrating, they can seem quite broken, they can leave us feeling quite stuck sometimes about what to do. So when we think about trying to work in those systems and navigate those systems, how does that leave us feeling? What kind of emotions do we get when we're working in that way? Ol's alluded to going a bit mad. Yeah, so we've got exhausted, hopeless, absolutely. Can feel like we're going round and round in circles, can't it? Like we're not getting anywhere. That we're being bounced back and forth from service to service. Vicarious trauma, absolutely. It can be really difficult, kind of emotionally, to support people who've experienced a lot of distress, and we can take some of that on ourselves. So feeling quite stuck, yeah, absolutely stuck, frustrated. Can feel tired, right? We get really tired doing this. We make assumptions about people we support. Yeah, that's a really interesting one. Thank you all. So we can start to make assumptions, and we can start to get defensive about the way we're working, or what we're doing, and yeah, we can start to project our feelings, our assumptions onto other people. So yeah, all in all, they're quite difficult feelings, right? Quite unhelpful, quite challenging. So why is reflective practice important, do we think, if we're sitting with those feelings? Think about what reflective practice means. So we spoke there about processing and about learning. Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Sarah. So we've got here helps us to process. So having a reflective practice space is really important for us to make sense of those feelings, where they're coming from, why we're frustrated, and what we can do about it, recognizing what our limitations are and what the reality of situations are and our access to services and referral processes. Also, okay, so what can we do? Where have we got power to do something a little bit differently? And how can we understand what we're feeling, why we're feeling it, and prevent ourselves making assumptions and projecting onto other people. So yeah, absolutely, you're right. I've got things coming in through the chat here. So to learn from our experiences, to make space to process, have some reassurance that we're not alone. Absolutely. So when we think about reflective practice, it's something we're doing as a group, as a team, quite a lot of the time. So yeah, it gives us that feeling of not being alone. We're all in this together. We've got this shared frustrations. Okay, so we're not doing anything wrong. It's not me just doing bad practice. There are frustrating systems. So I'm not alone in this, but also what can I learn from other people, and what can I share with other people about what's gone well. Excellent. Cool. So on that then, what are some of the challenges you faced at work? So we're not perfect. Yeah, we're all going to come across challenges. Organizations aren't perfect. There's going to be some challenges to the way they work. There's going to be some clunkiness sometimes. There are going to be limitations. And reflective practice isn't about getting to a position where there aren't any of those challenges. It's about the process we go through to overcome those challenges and make the most of what we've got. So what are some of the challenges that we face day to day, or some of the challenges that maybe you've experienced in your work so far? And thank you all for talking to me. This makes the session much easier. I appreciate your thoughts here. Right, okay, so we've got here not getting overly emotionally with clients and their trauma. Yeah, okay, so it's being able to work with someone in a compassionate way whilst also looking after ourselves, looking after our self-care. Things like broken systems and services. We've got a lack of time to actually think about things. Yeah, absolutely. So we go from one thing to another, and sometimes we do see ourselves then repeating the same mistakes because we haven't got time or space to think any differently. And so we fall into this routine or this way of working. And sometimes, yeah, that's not the most helpful. Right, what else we got? Negativity around reflection from staff. Okay, so when people are struggling with their own kind of well-being, their own emotional, we've got people maybe going through burnout, it can be really difficult to reflect because, yeah, so we've got here, people want to remain guarded because it's difficult to become vulnerable in front of your team. And that's a really, really important point. And it's something that we are going to come on and talk to. So we're going to come back to that one. As with traumatized organizations, stress, defensiveness, inequity. Yep, absolutely. Same thing. We're going to come back to those 2 points. So thank you for raising those. Really, really important. We've got underfunded services, lack of staff, trying to prevent people burning out, but not feeling able to offer person-centered support. Difficulties trying to stay trauma-informed when the service is under such high pressures. It can be hard to take a step back under stressful conditions. There's a lack of trust, siloed thinking, competition in services. Yeah, that's a really good one. Disjointed working. So what was that? We've been going 2 minutes and there's a whole host of challenges already there. So yeah, there's lots of things there. There's kind of personal challenges with workload, with feeling supported at work, with the type of work we're doing, and staying trauma informed and kind of managing the impact of vicarious trauma. There are frustrations with the systems that we're working. There's lots and lots of different challenges. And if we don't take the time to reflect on these, if we don't have the space to reflect on these, then we end up sometimes maybe feeling like we're to blame, like it's our fault, like we didn't do a good enough job, we should have done things differently, we failed. All feels pretty negative. Yeah, it doesn't put us in a good position to go and do that really challenging work day after day after day. Excellent. Is that everyone still with me? Everyone feeling like this makes sense? Yeah, got some nods there. Excellent. Okay. So next I wanted to share with you an example from Platform. Now this was slightly before my time, and this is a bit of a reflection from when Platform was going through a transition itself. So Pete mentioned we used to be Goval, and as we took the time to reflect on our practice and our way of working, we sort of saw some of the challenges and found that we were getting stuck in a vicious cycle. All, if you've got anything to add to this at any point, please jump in. But starting at the top, we've got some of the challenges actually that you've all mentioned already. So the things that we need to thrive aren't in place. So the system's broken, we're finding ourselves overworked, frustrated, either because we've grown too fast, or we've just taken on work that's not right for us, or our practice has just become out of date, that we haven't got the support and policies and processes in place that we need to really do some of this challenging work, to work in a trauma-informed way. And when that's the case, you start to see some of these feelings that we've spoken about already. Yeah, so feelings like there's distrust, like we're burning out, like we're frustrated because we can't do the work in the way we want to do it. There starts to become friction within teams potentially, but certainly with kind of leadership and funders and all of this stuff. So we have all of these frustrations and challenges that just sit there and fester. So we're feeling in that way, we see communication issues emerge. We don't feel as connected. So I know you mentioned in the chat earlier feelings of distrust, feeling like we're siloed, we're not working in a coherent, open, honest, vulnerable way, because it doesn't feel safe to, right? It doesn't feel safe to be vulnerable. There's so many frustrations. We're feeling a bit insecure probably about how we're working, because we're not working in the way that we want to. So everything shuts down. We don't communicate, we don't connect, and we just plow on in the only way we can. Yeah, doing the same kind of practice time and time again, getting increasingly frustrated. And that brings us down to this next circle here. So we feel unsafe, we feel unsure about what's going on, what are we supposed to be doing, how are we working in these systems that are broken. It all feels like it's crashing and burning. Add in any other kind of change to that. So for platform, bring in a pandemic, that's not going to make things any better. But any kind of change, that could be staff turnover, it could be restructuring, new leadership, growth, a whole bunch of new uncertainty. And then we start to feel burnout. We start to feel overwhelmed. And at that point, we don't have the capacity to implement the changes that we want to change, that we need to make. And so if we can't make any changes, we end up in this exactly the same position where we don't have the foundations in place that we need. And so it's really, really easy to find ourselves in this kind of spiral, in this vicious cycle, just going round and round and round, with things getting increasingly difficult. We feel increasingly burned out, and not very satisfied in our work, probably. Is that something that sounds familiar to people? I have lost the chat, sorry, bear with me. Let me open that again. Maybe just give me a thumbs up if that's something that's you've experienced before. Yeah. Okay. So it's starting to sound familiar. Very familiar. Cool. So reflective practice helps us break this cycle. Okay. So it helps us, it provides a structure through which we can get curious about what's going on and start to have those discussions. Okay, what's happening? Why is it happening? What have we got going for us that might be able to help us here? And how do we go about doing that? So if we want to stop spiraling, at some point we have to ask those questions, and that's what reflective practice allows us to do. Okay. Some of you may be familiar with this model already, but I wanted to share it because I've spoken so far about reflective practice as if it's something really easy to do. And there is a structure for it, and there is a process for it, and that's great. But before we do any of that, we need to make sure we're in a position where we have what's called reflective capacity. So reflective capacity is our ability to actually reflect on our practice. Yeah. So I'm going to pause that there and just briefly explain this diagram, and then I'll bring the two together. So this is a model taken from polyvagal theory. So I'm going to talk through it in a very simplified way, but I think it'll make the point I'm trying to make. So we have 3 stages to this diagram. We have this green bit down here, which is the place we're in when we're feeling pretty regulated, pretty calm. We're able to be curious, we're able to be open and honest and grounded. And this is the point, if we want to learn, if we want to grow, and we want to reflect honestly, this is the place we need to be. But none of us are here all the time. We tend to fluctuate between this green zone and these kind of orange and blue zones. So this orange space is the kind of stress state. So I'm sure everyone is familiar with the fight and flight response. So we experience a threat, our arousal increases, and we flight. We try and escape the threat. We start to feel anxiety and panic and worry, and we try and get away from the threat in any way we can. That might be running away, it might be putting our head in the sand and avoiding, but we try and separate ourselves from the threat. We have fight, which is, I'm going to take this threat head on, I'm going to fight it, I'm going to start feeling angry, I'm going to start feeling frustrated and irritated. And then we have fawn, which is, I can't escape the threat, I can't fight it, so I'm going to bring it in and try and please it. I'm going to appease it, I'm going to start people pleasing. because that's the best way for me to be able to deal with this threat at the moment. Above that, we have freeze. So freeze is the point of complete overwhelm, when we are completely burnt out, we start to shut down, and we don't feel like we can tackle the threat anymore. So, brief introduction to fight, flight, freeze, fawn. I'm glad there's no more F's in that, so I'm not sure I could get through it. If we are in a position where we don't feel safe to be vulnerable at work, we are burnt out, we don't have the kind of emotional space to bring ourselves back down into this green zone, then we can't be curious and we can't be open. Yeah, we're not in a position to reflect when we're up in this kind of blue orange zone. If we want to be able to engage in reflective practice, we need to increase our reflective capacity, which means regulating ourselves so we're back down into this kind of socially connected, safe space down here that's represented by this green box. Does that make sense to everybody? That's a whistle-stop tour of fight, flight. Is everyone still with me? Can you give me a thumbs up if you are, or a thumbs down if you're not? It's absolutely okay if you're not. We can go through that again in a slightly different way. Okay. We've got thumbs up. Everyone's still with me, I think. Great. Okay. So, thinking about some of those challenges then that we've spoken about earlier, where are we likely to sit on this curve? Which zone are we likely to sit in if we're experiencing those challenges and we don't have a network around us that feels like a safe space to fail? Oh, sorry. So if we go back to, let me scroll up the chat. So we've got some of these challenges. We're working with people who have high levels of distress. We're working in broken systems. We're not feeling supported. We're not feeling like the organization that we're part of has got our back. We don't have space to sit down and think. What zone are we likely to be in? Are we likely to be in the green zone, the orange zone, or the blue zone? So yeah, we're in that, likely to be in that blue zone, maybe. I can't, or even if we're in I can, it's going to be fight, flight. So we're not likely to be down in this green space. Everything other than green, yeah, absolutely, all anywhere but here. So when we think about implementing reflective practice, we need to be in a position where we have the freedom to choose what our next action is. We need to be in a position where we're not making quick, emotionally fueled decisions. And that's exactly where we'd be if we're in fight, flight, or freeze, or fawn. So there's an example here. I've stolen this from a toolkit that we've developed. And it says, your neighbour's dog breaks your flower pot. Your neighbour apologizes. Now, if we are in fight, flight, fawn, freeze, we are very likely to react to that in an emotional way. So why did you leave your dog unleashed around my house? You've got no sense of respect for other people's property. Yeah, we're going to snap. We're going to get irritable. We're going to react really quickly. Whereas actually, if we're in a more regulated state and we can think about what's happened and we can reflect on that, then we can respond rather than react. And we're more likely then to, do you know what? it's not a problem. I was going to replace them anyway. Come inside, let's have a cup of tea, let's talk about it. And that's the place we want to be when we're thinking about reflection. Easier said than done, right? I've basically just said, if you want to reflect, you need to make sure you feel safe first. I appreciate that is not something you can just switch on. So I want to quickly run through a tool that some of you might be familiar with. Is anyone familiar with Brené Brown's work? So she has developed a tool called the Braving Inventory. And this is a tool for teams to use to help develop safe environments that create conditions where people feel safe to learn, feel safe to fail, and then have the capacity to engage in reflective practice. So I will run through what each of these things mean. And I would encourage all of you actually to take this away and just work through it. Think about your own team, your own workplace. Use it with your teams if you want to, because it can be a really useful way of actually looking at what are our strengths and what are the challenges when it comes to building trust within an organization, when it comes to building reflective capacity of a team. So there are 7 values highlighted in this inventory. Handily, they spell out the word braving, but I think some of the acronym is it's a little bit out there. So I will run through what each of them mean. First off, we have boundaries. Pretty much what it says on the tin. Okay, so it's about setting boundaries. What's okay, what's not okay, and making it clear what you will do, what you won't do, and why that is. Yeah, so if we want to build trust, boundaries, developing our own boundaries, but also respecting other people's boundaries are really, really important. So if someone says, no, I can't do that, then there's a reason for that, right? We need to respect that. Second one, reliability, is you'll do what you say you'll do. So at work, that means staying aware of your own boundaries, your own competencies, your own limitations, so you don't overpromise, and that you are able then to deliver what you say that you're going to deliver. So it's about being able to balance your commitments and competing priorities so that when you say you're going to do something, you can do it. Because if people say, yeah, I'll do this, and then last minute they turn around and say, no, I can't do this, or I haven't done it, or sorry, I forgot, or I've got too busy, that can be a barrier to trust. And of course, none of us are perfect, but if we can try and be reliable and dependable, that's really, really key in building trust. And if we can't be reliable, let's talk about why. Okay, let's explain it. Let's not just let it come out of the blue. Accountability. So this is about owning your mistakes. Yeah, we all make them. None of us are perfect, but it's about apologizing and making amends. So if we've done something wrong, okay, I'm sorry, that was my fault. I take responsibility for it. Let's talk about it. Why did it happen? If there's a rupture, let's repair it. So taking accountability and responsibility for your actions. Vault is where I think it gets a little bit desperate for a V here. But vault is basically confidentiality. If someone shares something with you and it's not yours to share further, don't share it further. Because a really good way to break trust is to share someone else's information when they didn't want it to be shared and they hadn't given you permission to do so. So don't tell what isn't yours. Integrity is choosing courage over comfort. Sometimes we have to have difficult conversations that we would rather not have, but actually being clear and sticking to our values is vital for building trust, and is actually often the kindest thing to do. So, do you know what, if work isn't fitting with your values, then raising that, challenging that, that's exactly what platform had to do. It's exactly what Pete was saying at the beginning. Sometimes the contracts just didn't fit with how we wanted to work. Excuse me. And so sometimes it's about having those difficult conversations and letting that work go, or having difficult conversations and changing the way that we practice. Non-judgment is what it says in the tin. If I need help, I need to feel like I can ask for help and not be judged for it. And equally, if someone comes and asks for me for help, I need to be able to listen to that, try my best to do something about that, but most importantly, not make any judgments about someone for needing help, because we all need support at some point or another. And we need to know that when we ask for it, then someone's going to help us get that. And we're not going to be looked down upon for asking. And then finally is generosity. So this is about making the most generous interpretation of a situation. So we will all find ourselves in situations where we don't have every single piece of the picture, and we do have to make assumptions. We have to fill in some blanks. Generosity means that we go into that and we fill in those blanks in the most possible way. So if someone hasn't done something, then we, instead of just thinking, you know, it's probably just because they couldn't be asked, what's a more generous way of looking at that? Is it because they're overworked? Is it because there's stuff going on at home? Let's not make a negative assumption about this when there could be a really valid reason for it. So it's basically giving people the benefit of the doubt. Does that make sense? Do all of those points make sense to everybody? Again, just give me a thumbs up or a thumbs down. I don't know what other emojis there are on here that would, a thumbs up or a thumbs down might do it. Okay, great. So this is a nice tool for using, for reflecting on practices internally, for building trust within a team. The other one I wanted to run through with you is a really simple formulation. So this next one is useful if there is a particular challenge that you want to reflect on, that you want to discuss, that you want to problem solve. So if I can get the next, oh, sorry, went too far. I was looking at the chat and wondering why that hadn't changed, but that's because that's not going to change. So here we have what is called the 5 Ps model. And this is a formulation tool, and formulation is it just means making sense of our experiences, of other experiences, and drawing on all of the information, all of the background information to help better understand a problem. So it's like putting all of the pieces of the jigsaw together. And this is something we can use individually, we can use with teams. But the benefit of using it with teams is that we get everyone together, we get a diversity of information and interpretation, and it just helps with putting that big picture together. So we have in the middle here the problem, P number 1. This is the current issue. So what's going on? This is the challenge. This is the fact that we can't get someone the support we need because we're being bounced back into services, and we're feeling really frustrated about it, and everyone's got a bit hopeless in the team. We don't know what to do. So to understand this, we need to think about, okay, what happened before? What happened? What has led up to this? How did we get into this position? We need to think about what's the thing that's triggered us to feel this way? What's got us to this point where we're overwhelmed, where we feel like we're stuck now, we can't do anything about it? but also what are our strengths? What are the things that's going to help us here? What can we draw on to try and move forward? And then the final P is what's keeping us stuck. So what is it that's keeping us in this vicious cycle that we spoke about earlier? What is it that's making us spiral round and round and round? And by asking those 5 questions, by looking at those 5 Ps, it really helps us explore not only the situation, but our thoughts about the situation, our feelings, our actions, what's gone well, what hasn't gone well, what are our strengths that we haven't tapped into yet, and what are the barriers that we need to try and solve before we can move forward with this challenge. Does that make sense? Yeah. So this is really, it's just a problem solving tool, but it's a really useful way of having a process to follow that helps you look at each of those aspects of a problem in detail, in depth. So I did wonder if this is something we wanted to work through. And I don't know how we feel about that, whether that's something we want to do recorded, whether that's something we'd rather do not recorded, whether that's something we'd rather not do at all, or maybe talk about at a different meeting once we'd had time to sit down and think about it a bit. I'm completely led by you at this point. What are we feeling? Is there an example? Anyone got an example that they want to work through as a group, or are we not feeling it? And either way is absolutely fine. Oh, go on, Ol.
Yeah, thanks. I don't want to speak for people before they've had a chance to say it, but I do wonder if people bringing in a practice problem might feel potentially not unsafe, but not appropriate maybe for when people are being recorded. So I was just going to suggest 2 options. One is I could bring a bit of a system problem, which we could talk about as a recorded session. Or potentially you could turn recording off, someone could bring a practice example. So yeah, I suppose maybe those are 2 helpful options.
Yeah, I'm really happy to stop recording if people are more comfortable with that, if they want to bring some reality to discussion.
So yeah, unless people come in, do you want me to just pose a question and then we could explore it? And oh, there we go. One from
Oh, here we go.
Brilliant.
Okay.
Let's do that then.
Should we pause the recording then?
Yeah, let's do that. That's the best thing to do, isn't it? Right. Yeah. How you do it is a bit more challenging. Stop recording. Okay, and are you sure you want to stop recording?